Hello, everyone. I'm here with Mike right now. This is a little bit of a different format for me, but I'm super excited to get into it. We're just gonna simply be talking ball right here, and I haven't had an opportunity to talk about the coaching situation around the league right now. Head coaches are now getting hired. Okay, so I really need to get on this. I figure this is a really good format to go about it and get content out about this super important part of the season for for these teams, part of the offseason for these teams. And, there's just so much stuff with playoff football going on. It's hard to really get into this. So I'm glad that I'm, making an extra video this week to get my opinions out before all the fun is over and all the head coaches are hired. And at least three of these teams end up making a terrible mistake. But anyway, Mike, how about you go ahead and introduce yourself? Because it's the first time I'm having you or any guest on my YouTube page.
Well, I just want to say I'm honored to be the first guest on this YouTube page. It's a distinction that I will carry for the rest of my life. But my name is Mike. I have a YouTube channel as well, Defran NFL. You can find me if you search in the YouTube bar. Hopefully, I'll pop up. But yeah, I'm really excited. We've recorded a couple pods together, a couple videos together. We just did a video on my channel talking about the divisional round. Super excited to talk about coaches because I have a horse in this race. So I'm very excited to give my thoughts as a Seahawks fan, but as a fan of the NFL in general. But I'm excited to get into it and talk some head coaches with a certified. I say this every time, with a certified ball knower, no huddle NFL.
Thank you. I really appreciate the compliment. If you want another video of us two talking, and trust me, if you stay to listen to the rest of this one, you're going to really enjoy hearing us talk ball. If you want to hear more of that, check out the video that's going to be in my description. It is going to be on Mike's channel. Very easy way to look at his content right after because he pumps out a lot of great high caliber stuff, especially now with that new setup looking fresh.
Thank you.
But yeah, let's just jump right into this. Let's jump right into this. We did, like you said, divisional round predictions on your channel. Now I want to go into the head coaching situation going on. We're going to go through every team that has a head coaching vacancy and talk about who their top candidate likely is or who they're going to ultimately end up hiring. We're not going for if I was in their position, this is what I'd do type of perspective. Although if you feel like there's someone that's a no-brainer that they should be going for, that they probably won't, feel free to mention it. But we're aiming more to predict what these teams are going to do, why it makes sense for them, or why it doesn't make sense, but they're delusional, so they're going to end up doing that instead. In case it isn't clear, there is at least one guy that I'm going to talk about with at least one team that I'm going to talk about that I don't really like, but we'll cross that road when we come to it. Let's start with the LA Chargers. This is a team that should be able to compete, should have been able to compete the past couple of years, but the head coach very clearly held them back. Now they have an opportunity to bring in a new guy. Who do you expect them to take here?
So I will put a little asterisk around my pick for the Chargers because I think if Jim Harbaugh is willing to leave Michigan, I think he's the guy. I think he is going to be the guy, Jim Harbaugh, to be the coach of the Chargers. Now, if he doesn't, I think they scramble. I don't really know what they do here. Kellen Moore would probably be the option. But if I had to put my chips in the table for one guy, I would say Jim Harbaugh. Listen, he's a West Coast guy. He played for the Chargers formerly. He coached both in San Francisco and at Stanford over there on the West Coast. He's been in the Midwest for a little bit, but I think he makes his return. He has called previously. He's previously said that he thinks Justin Herbert is better than Andrew Luck, which is very high praise for a guy who coached Andrew Luck at Stanford. And I think that if you're the Chargers, you're looking at a guy who can really rebuild the teams because the 49ers were in a really bad spot. He brought them back to be contenders. Michigan was not in a place that Michigan wanted to be. He brought them back, made them champions. Jim Harbaugh to me makes a lot of sense. I think he's my prediction to go to the Los Angeles Chargers.
And now I'm going to sound like a broken record right off the bat. So thanks for doing that to me on my own channel. But yeah, Jim Harbaugh, I think, is absolutely the move here because of the exact reason that you said, right? They want to establish a winning culture. And no one better to do that than the guy that just won the NCAA championship this year. I mean, what he did with Michigan is a true testament to him as a head coach, as a leader of men. And that's what this team needs more than anything. More than they need an X's and O's guy. More than they need, some mastermind of offense or defense. More than they need someone that could really find talent. They need someone that will just change the culture in that locker room. That's what they need more than anything. Because under Justin Herbert, they just haven't had it. Okay? Anthony Lynn couldn't do it, and we know for a fact Brandon Staley couldn't do it. Now let's give someone that has done it before at the college level, and he's done it before at the NFL level. I mean, that San Fran team under him was really successful. I think it's really difficult for a coach like Jim Harbaugh to turn that away. I think if they offer him the head coaching spot, I'd be very surprised if he says no. And frankly, the Chargers are a team I think work perfectly for him for the exact reason that you said. And I mean, how could you not, right? He has to be a head coach somewhere. He should be successful in this league. He has been successful before. It seems somewhat of a guarantee that he'll at least be better than Staley, right?
Yes. Yes. I think the number one problem with the Chargers in years past, they haven't had an identity. Like, what are the Chargers? Jim Harbaugh's teams always have identity. They are physical, they can run the ball, and they can make plays. And that's what Michigan was. That's what San Francisco was back in the day. He gives the Chargers an instant identity, and I think that's something they were sorely lacking with Brandon Staley.
Yeah, and I mean, that's, like you said, something they were missing, especially the physicality on offense, right? They were completely incapable of running the ball between the tackles, and that's why they lost that game to the Jaguars in the playoffs, because they couldn't just stall out the clock. They wouldn't run the ball because they couldn't, right? And bringing in a guy like Harbaugh is going to establish that. It will. Whether you have the guys, whether you have the workhorses or not, the team is going to play better because Harbaugh is a leader. He knows how to establish an identity for a football team. I completely agree with you there. He really is the perfect pick for the Chargers. Although, Bill Belichick in LA, I would truly love to see it. No, the problem there is he'll only be there for a little bit. He'll only be there for a little bit, but I still would really, really like to see that happen. So now let's move on to a young football team, a football team that was very, very lackluster this year. Expectations weren't high, but even then, they disappointed. The Carolina Panthers, right? Last year, they took a safe bet on Frank Reich. It didn't pay off. It simply did not pay off at all. Now, do you expect them to go with a younger head coach who, could take them over the edge, could instantly elevate every single player and prevent them from needing to rely on guys like Adam Thielen to step up? Do you expect them to take a mastermind on offense, a young guy, to grow with this team, establish an identity with this team? He might not have head coaching experience, but it could pay off. It could pay dividends for them. Do you expect them to swing big like that, or do you expect them to take another safe bet here? Before you say a specific coach, I want to hear, which type of guy do you want more? The pre-established head coach who has done it before, or the more risky guy?
I think they try to swing for the fences and go for a younger, fresher, sexier pick. But unfortunately, I think they strike out. I don't think they're able to land one of the big minds, so to speak. So yes, I think David Tepper is a guy. He has shown, as the owner, has shown to be very aggressive. The point number one is the trade that they made for Bryce Young. So I think in his perfect world, Ben Johnson would be the coach of the Carolina Panthers. Bobby Sloag would be the coach of one of these younger, fresher, sexier picks. However, if I'm Ben Johnson or Bobby Sloag, I wouldn't touch that job with a 10-foot pole. I wouldn't. I would completely stay away from the Panthers job. I think with so many coaches, so many coaching vacancies around the league, the Panthers job is not very attractive, in my opinion. So again, I do think they try to go after one of these younger, hipper, cooler guys, but I just don't think that they are able to land one. I think they go fishing and they don't come back with any fish. So my
really
prediction,
quickly, what makes you think? What makes you think that this job's so unappealing in that way? Because I mean, they have presumably a young quarterback that coaches like. They have stuff to work with. Now, maybe they don't have draft picks to work with, and maybe that's something that really scares them away. but you have
Well,
Brian Burge, you have pieces on defense. Is it really that unappealing of a job in your opinion?
I think it's really unappealing for a couple of reasons. A, you're inheriting the worst team in the NFL, and you don't have the pick. That alone is just major red flag. At least the Commanders, you could say, well, they have pick number 2. We can get a quarterback, whatever. That's a huge red flag. First of all. Second off, that means, hey, you got to roll with Bryce Young. Bryce Young seems like his confidence is shot. He had a terrible year. Now, I'm not saying Bryce Young can't recover and be a quality NFL quarterback. I'm not saying that, but it is a mountain to climb. Offensive skill position-wise, you don't have a lot to work with. You got Adam Thielen as your wide receiver 1. That's not appealing. And defensively, yes, you do have some good pieces, but I think part of the reason their defense was so good was because of their defensive coordinator, Avero. And if you're the coach, there's no guarantee that you're able to keep that guy. So, again, worst team in the league, don't have your pick. You have a quarterback who is, shaken with his confidence. I don't think that they're able to land, again, one of these big young fishes. Now, sticking with my philosophy, I do think they go for a younger offensive guy, not one of the big names. My prediction for the Panthers is Frank Smith, the offensive coordinator of the Miami Dolphins, who is not, I would say, high on a lot of teams' priority list, but he has been getting interviews. He's been getting interviews a lot. And again, if you're the Carolina Panthers, I think your main priority is fix Bryce Young. And Frank Smith is part of the team with Mike McDaniel that were able to fix Tua Tagovailoa. They were able to bring him back and to be a really good quarterback in the regular season. I have to put a little asterisk around there in the regular season. And I think he can make the argument that, hey, David Tepper, I can do that with the Carolina Panthers. He also probably doesn't have as many options as a Ben Johnson, a Bobby Slowick, a Bill Belichick, right? So if the Panthers don't have a coach and they've kind of been, shunned by all these other guys, I think Frank Smith would take the call, and I think he could become the next head coach of the Carolina Panthers.
I really do like that. I really do. I mean, that's an offense. If they run a similar type of thing to what Miami's running right now, I absolutely see Bryce Young working out in that. I think that would be a really fun story, but I have them landing Bobby Slowick, so I'm allowing them to get Bobby Slowick in my personal headcanon of whatever ends up happening. Now, of course, I'm not going to try and predict those curveball picks, those curveball hirings that kind of come out of nowhere. I'm not really trying to predict that. But if one or two of those happen and Slowick does have an opportunity to coach the Atlanta Falcons or one of these other top-tier teams or top-tier landing spots with a lot of young talent, a lot of cap space to work with, I do think Slowick would take that job instead. But I do kind of have them get in the dream scenario, landing Slowick, because Slowick does like Bryce Young. We know this. We know this. If the Texans had the pick when Bryce Young was still on the board and they had to pick between CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, they were split. They really were willing to take either of those two. And that tells me that the offensive coordinator liked both of them. I think it would be a really fun story for Bobby Slowick to not just help CJ Stroud look amazing in his first year, but also help the other great quarterback in that draft class, or at least the quarterback that looked great in that draft class, Bryce Young, also look phenomenal. Okay? I think that would be a really fun story, and I think it really would happen because, like I said, Slowick likes him. And maybe the lack of a pick really scares him away, but I don't think he's going to have as many options as you might expect. Now, again, surprise hiring here or there could ultimately result in Slowick having an opportunity with one of these other teams. And that would also mean that he won't be able to be a Carolina Panther. I do think Frank Smith is a good worst-case scenario for them. And that's honestly not that bad of a situation. It really isn't. I am a little bit more optimistic about their ability to land a head coach that they really like. I think they're going to be able to land Slowick. I think they're going to be able to really help Bryce Young work in this league. I also find it really fun that both of us agree Young needs to be in a Shanahanian offense. He's built to be 100%. In a Shanahanian offense. We both completely agree on that. Frank Smith is a disciple of Mike McDonald. I almost said Mike McCarthy. Mike McDonald, who worked under Kyle Shanahan. And then we got Slowick, who is a disciple of DeMeco Ryans, who worked under, once again, Kyle Shanahan. So we know for a fact they need to get a Shanahan guy. They do. I
Yes,
don't
yes,
think anyone's going to really deny that. That's the best fit for Bryce Young. I
yes.
have them getting Slowick. I think that'll be really good for them, although I also think it would be really good if they end up with Frank Smith, who is a safer option or more likely of an option for them.
Mhm.
But I truly think that would be great. I do.
Do you want to
And
hear
Slowick,
now
there's a little bit more risk too, because
there is.
this is
He's a
his first year as a coordinator. Yeah.
Exactly. Do you want to hear my prediction for Bobby Slowick, where I think Bobby Slowick goes?
Sure. Go right ahead. Lay it on me.
Okay. Because I think this is a good transition to then the next team. I think Bobby Slowick is your new head football coach for the Tennessee Titans. Here's the thing. If you're the Tennessee Titans, you have to do two things. Or this accomplishes two things, rather. A, you got to figure out quarterback. Is it Will Levis? Is it Malik Willis? Is it maybe somebody you draft? They have pick 7, I believe. Maybe it's somebody you take a pick 7. Who's the quarterback? Let's make him better. Bobby Slowick has proven this year with CJ Stroud, he can do that. Also, if you're the Tennessee Titans, how awesome would it be to poach away one of the best assistant coaches from your division rival, the Houston Texans? I think that kills 2 birds with 1 stone. It makes you better and it makes your rival worse. I think Bobby Slowick, again, this Titans job isn't very appealing, right? They're not a very good team. You're replacing what was a really good head coach in Mike Vrabel. I don't think this job is like super appealing. Like team guys would hold out for the Titans job, but it's a head coaching gig in the division. Again, you're familiar now with the Houston Texans. You'd be going to the Tennessee Titans. You'd have an opportunity if they really like Michael Penix, if they really like, maybe Jaden Daniels falls to 7. If you really like Bo Nix or J.J. McCarthy. I think that's ridiculous to take J.J. McCarthy at 7, but whatever, if that's his prerogative. You have your pick. You have some good players. I think Tajay Spears is really good, but again, this is a team that is going to be really a reclamation project. They're going to have to pick themselves back up and figure it out. And I think that the Titans are going to go hard and fast to get Bobby Slowick. And again, it kills 2 birds with 1 stone for that one.
I also think teams might appeal to that job. Coaches might appeal to that job because there's a decently high likelihood that they have their quarterback. Now, maybe it won't be the best quarterback on earth, but Levis could be the guy. I still haven't given up on Malik Willis, believe it or not. Maybe I'm alone in that thought, but I still think
you might be.
I still think his physical ability could be like the next big quarterback in this league. He just needs some more time in the oven. He needs to be taught a little bit more about how to play at an NFL level. I think a quarterback battle between those two could definitely bring out the best of both of those guys. And I think ultimately you'll end up finding a good franchise quarterback out of one of those two within the next 3 years. I truly do think that. And this is a job that you'll take because you're building for the next 3 years. And that's why I don't think Tennessee is going to go with a Bobby Slowick. I think that they're going to go with someone that is going to come from a culture that has rebuilt a football team, has went through the process of rebuilding a team. Not just, they conveniently landed their franchise quarterback with their early top 5 pick, with the 2nd overall pick. Not just, 1 year after joining the team, yeah, we're great. Not one of those, okay? I think that the Titans are going to look for a coach that has went through a tough, gritty rebuild and, kept the culture going even when they were a losing franchise. I think they're going to look for a Dan Campbell type guy. And I don't like this hiring, but I think they're going to go with Aaron Glenn. I do. I think they're going to go for the defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. I don't like it because I don't think that's a very good defense. I think that if you want to bring in the Dan Campbell culture and you can't get Ben Johnson, you should go with Montgomery, the assistant head coach, Scotty Montgomery. I think that he would be a good pick because he was an assistant coach. You know what Dan Campbell was? He was an assistant coach. So if you want to build a culture, maybe do the same type of thing. You want to get the next Dan Campbell, use the same strategy that was used to land Dan Campbell. That's how I look at it. But still, teams want defensive coordinators. They want offensive coordinators, even if those units that they coordinate for aren't good. And Aaron Glenn, I think, is going to be an example of that. They want someone that can really build the culture. And I don't doubt Aaron Glenn's ability to do that. I really don't. But I do doubt his knowledge of schemes I do
Yeah.
look at that Detroit defense, and I'm like, what do they do? What's special about them? Right?
Yeah. That's the
What
clear weakness of
exactly
that
is
Detroit
throwing
team.
off quarterbacks about this Detroit defense and what they're doing? Nothing. That's the simple answer. Nothing. They're not scheming up ways to make up for the fact their secondary isn't good. They're not. They run a pretty basic defense and it doesn't work. So why would you want to bring them in? The culture. That's why. I think the Titans are looking to rebuild the culture. And I think that's going to result in Aaron Glenn getting a job on a team that is going to be rebuilding, but it's okay because I think he has been around a really good rebuild. He learned the ways to create a really good team from a pretty bare bones spot. Now, again, I still don't love the hiring, but I get the rationale behind it.
Yeah, he's a former player, correct?
Yeah,
I'm pretty certain he's a former player. So
yes.
yeah, I mean that's obviously appealing, bringing in former players. I think we've seen a trend of that in recent years. I agree with your reasoning. I also agree with your assessment that I don't think it would be a good hire. I think that this is a guy who you said in the beginning, like, hey, 3 of these teams are going to hire, failures basically, and this would probably be one of them. I wouldn't think Aaron Glenn is going to be the head football coach in Tennessee for more than a couple seasons, and maybe this is kind of a hiring to get them a really good draft pick. Not that obviously that's their goal, but this hiring would get them a really good draft pick possibly. So again, I don't disagree with your reasoning, but I don't think that would be a good hire. It would be if I'm a Titans fan, I'd be like, really, Aaron Glenn? Like, come on. So
I mean, again,
very
culture
hire.
Culture is important, but it would be
is.
Nice to, again, if you're going to be a defensive coordinator, I want a good defensive coordinator. If I'm bringing in a guy just for the culture, bring in the assistant head coach. I don't get why that's so hard. I don't get why Scotty Montgomery hasn't gotten a single head coach interview, and I don't think he will, which is the really dumb thing. But whatever.
Yeah.
Teams want coordinators, not assistant head coaches, even though the exact guy they're trying to chase, the exact guy they're trying to replicate the style of, Dan Campbell, is a former assistant head coach. But whatever. Maybe it'll work out a lot better than we think. Maybe he won't get hired at all, and I kind of hope that that's what ends up happening. No offense to Aaron Glenn, obviously.
Yeah, no offense, Aaron Glenn.
I just want teams to be good, and I don't think they're going to be a great team with Aaron Glenn as the head coach. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I am wrong.
Yeah.
How do you feel about your Seattle Seahawks? Who do you think they're going to bring in?
So it's very hard, and I'll be completely transparent with you. It's very hard for me to take off the blinders of being a Seahawks fan and what my heart is telling me. So I am going to give you a guy that both I really want and that I think is likely, given General Manager John Schneider's comments earlier in this week. I don't know if you saw, he did a press conference, and he made a pretty big emphasis on the fact that recently, like, the trend in the NFL is hiring a defensive coach. It's great, right, if he's a good coach. However, then you need to hire a good offensive coordinator, and if that offensive coordinator is good, he goes get a head coaching job in a couple of years. So he very much alluded to the fact that the Seahawks are going to try to go with an offensive coach. Additionally, former Seahawks coach Mike Holmgren apparently had a secret meeting with John Schneider where he implored John to hire an offensive coach. So I do think that they're going to go the offensive coach route. Now, this might sound like a hot take, and I'm ready to defend it as if you want to push back on it. But I think the Seahawks get Ben Johnson. I do.
If you're looking at the Seattle Seahawks fan in you. It's the Seahawks fan in you.
Hear me out. Hear me out for 20 seconds. I got to put my conspiracy glasses on.
Sure.
The Seahawks are this is no debate. The record-wise, the Seahawks are the best team that has a current vacancy at head coach. I also think they're the best team. I don't think that that's much of a debate. The Seahawks, I think, are a really good spot because they have really, really good young players, both on offense and defense. So you're getting a talented team. You're getting a team. You're inheriting a winning team. You're inheriting a 9-8 team, right? This is not like a 5-12, 4-13 rebuild project, which most head coaching jobs would be. You're getting a really talented team that just won 9 games. You're getting it in an NFC that is definitely weaker. So if you go into the AFC, it's going to be a lot harder to compete to win Super Bowls than it would be in the NFC with the Seattle Seahawks. You're getting, in my opinion, a really good GM in John Schneider, an owner that is very hands-off. You're not going to have a lot of the owner breathing down your neck, like I mentioned with David Tepper earlier. And I just think that you're inheriting a really, really good team with the Seahawks, and a team that can easily just accelerate themselves to contenders with the right coaching hire. If you're Ben Johnson, I think you're looking at the Seahawks and you're saying they have 2 really good running backs. Well, they have 1 really good running back, 1 pretty good running back in Zach Charbonnet. JSN, I think, can be a version of my Amon-Ra St. Brown. DK is a physical freak. They've got Geno Smith, who is a good but not great quarterback. It's probably a better coach outside of the Chargers with Justin Herbert. It might be the best quarterback situation available with head coach vacancies. You got a talented defense.
He's better than Goff.
Probably better than Goff. I would say he's better than Goff. You have a talented defense, but one that needs good schematic, play calling and good schemes and everything like that. I think the Seahawks would be an appealing job for both the Seahawks to get Ben Johnson and for Ben Johnson to come to Seattle. I think that Ben Johnson is a Seahawk, and I'm ready for you to now just completely just break my heart.
Well, I'm sorry to break it to you, but if you look at who Seattle has been interviewing, they have all been these established guys. Okay. And that's why it's hard
they have an interview with Ben Johnson tomorrow, I believe, on Saturday.
Yeah. No, that's true. But for the most part, they've been interviewing the established guys. And with me, I truly do find it hard to believe that they go with someone risky. I think that they're going to be a franchise that goes with the safer, experienced head coach. I think Raheem Morris is definitely in that conversation. But I think they get Vrabel. I do. And I honestly think that works really well for them. I really do. I think they're going to be a good football team. I absolutely think that defense, you just talked about how they have the skill, but man, they kind of just need someone to put it together. They need someone to make sure that they're refined, okay? And Vrabel's going to do that. As a defensive player, as a former defensive player, I think he's going to bring out the best in that linebacker core with Jordan Brooks. I think veteran Bobby Wagner, he's gone. But I do truly think they have young pieces in that linebacker core that are going to look a lot better with Vrabel there. I think they have young pieces on that defense that are going to look a lot better. Witherspoon, Woolen, those two are going to look a lot better with someone like Vrabel watching them every day in practice and refining them. Okay, and then I think offensively, it's very possible that you look at him bringing Arthur Smith with you. And I know that sounds awful, but the truth is, as an offensive coordinator, I think Arthur Smith is I thought he did a very good job in Tennessee. I did. Then he went to the Falcons and he got a little bit too creative. But I think with Vrabel, making sure he doesn't go a little bit too much off his rocker, he does a good job. He just needs someone to restrain him. And I think that duo of Arthur Smith and Vrabel coming to Seattle would be very good for Geno Smith. I think it would be very good for Charbonnet. I think it will be very good for JSN. I think that this entire team would look a lot better with someone like Vrabel coming in, bringing in his guys with him. And I just want to say, I could absolutely see JSN playing the A.J. Brown role. I definitely could. I think those are two players that not many people see similarities between, but I absolutely do. I think those are two guys that are going to take a slant and take it to the house. And I think the play action for Geno Smith would really benefit him. I think the Arthur Smith offense works really well there. And I think Vrabel, as someone that, like I said, he knows how to win in this league. He knows how to win in this league. The Seahawks want to win right now. They want to win right now. They're a young team, but they want to win right now. That's why they're not going to take a Ben Johnson. They want to take one of the more safe guys. And I think Vrabel is not just safe, but I think he's also really good. So I know you sound a little bit hurt, or you look a little bit hurt by me saying this, but I think it works well. So tell me what you think of your potential new head coach being Mike Vrabel.
So Vrabel is by no means a bad option. And truthfully, I personally think if we're not able to land like Bobby Slowick, Ben Johnson, or whatever reason, Vrabel is a guy that's more than adequate. He'll make us, I think, our defense better overnight, make us more physical, all of that stuff. When you said Mike Vrabel, though, I had like Arthur Smith PTSD flashbacks of him like never throwing the ball to DK or anybody, and it just like really messed me up.
But that wasn't happening when he was the offensive coordinator. Keep that in mind.
True.
Yeah.
But you also redeemed yourself because you were very nice to JSN, and as the world's biggest JSN stan, I'm very glad that you did that. And this is why I call you a certified ball knowers, because you understand JSN's that guy. Mike Vrabel, he does make sense for Seattle, and truthfully, I wouldn't be shocked if he's the hire here. But I feel like I don't know. Maybe I'm just greedy, and I just really want an offensive guy because I think that's just the direction that the league is in. but I really do. I can't help. Again, it's so hard for me to take off the blinders and be, I guess, logistical about this because I am a Seahawks fan and I do have strong opinions about my team. But it would be disappointing to a certain degree to not get an offensive guy. I just think that's the direction the league is going. I think if you look at the best teams in the league, almost all of them are led by offensive coaches. And I am probably a bigger Ben Johnson fan than a lot of people. I think that he would work wonders in Seattle. I don't know if you saw that video, but it was the Amon-Ra St. Brown highlight tape, and then it said Ben Johnson or JSN if Ben Johnson goes to Seattle. Yeah. Exactly. Like that's so proof. So Ben Johnson, my heart tells me Ben Johnson, but again, would Mike Vrabel be a terrible coach? No, he would not be. I wonder if we'll ever be truly elite enough to contend for Super Bowls with Mike Vrabel, but he wouldn't be a bad hire, I don't think at all.
Two more things to kind of keep you optimistic here, right? I think that, one, your concern about defensive-minded head coaches and how they need to always bring in the right offensive coordinator, I don't think that's much of a concern because Arthur Smith isn't getting another head coaching job. So if you bring in Arthur Smith with him, if you bring in Arthur Smith with him, which I think is really likely, you have your offensive coordinator for the next couple of years, and I think he's going to do a good job. He is. And then, so it's that. And, yeah, it sucks that you're not getting the upside of a Ben Johnson. But what if Ben Johnson sucks? What if Ben Johnson is just another example of those guys who is no C, but not a head coach? What then? Then all of a sudden you're feeling really good because you got a solidified product in Mike Vrabel. And you're not wasting this team's years as a legitimate, top tier in terms of talent. This is a top tier team. They really are, at least offense.
Yeah.
And I think the defense is going to look a lot better with someone like Vrabel to really refine it. So that's how I feel. But I'm curious as to where you have Vrabel going because surely you have him getting hired, no?
So I will say one last thing before I talk about Vrabel, and I will give you my Vrabel prediction in just a second. To your point, and I hate making this point against myself. This is bad arguing tactics. But I live in Illinois, and I remember the excitement in 2017 when the Bears hired Matt Nagy, and we saw the way that turned out. So could Ben Johnson be Matt Nagy? I don't think so, but it's always a possibility to your point. But Mike Vrabel, I think, is the next coach of the Washington Commanders. Now, I originally, a couple of weeks ago, I would have said Bill Belichick, but I'm going to, not to spoil it, I'm going to give my Bill Belichick prediction in a few minutes. I think Mike Vrabel goes to Washington for a few different reasons. First of all, he's an East Coast guy, stays in the East Coast. He was obviously most prominently with the Patriots. I know he went south to Tennessee, but go back to the East Coast. I think if you're the Washington Commanders, the defense has been putrid, like just straight up. Like there's really no other way to describe it. He makes your defense better. Like you said, I agree. Wherever Mike Vrabel goes, Arthur Smith will follow. Arthur Smith is going to then go to Washington to be the coordinator. So now you have good head coach, good offensive coordinator, probably. You have the second overall pick. Now, the big problem, I think, for Mike Vrabel in Tennessee, and the reason they weren't able to have prolonged success is because they were never able to get that quarterback right. Like, Ryan Tannehill was he was feasible for a few years, but he never elevated the Titans, right? You get a guy who we all presume is going to be Drake May, second overall. You could really stretch that Mike Vrabel team to farther than the Titans were able to stretch it and be better, right? Because we forget, I mean, just a few years ago, the Titans were they were in the AFC Championship game against Kansas City Chiefs. So this is a guy who has been able to see a lot of success with mediocre quarterback play. What if we then get him the supposed number 2 guy in the NFL draft? So I think Mike Vrabel fits with Washington. I think after Ron Rivera, they are going to want a guy who is stable. Again, that is the argument you just made against Seattle. I'm going to make against Washington because I think they want somebody that's stable. They want somebody to kind of glue all the pieces together. And like you said, Arthur Smith's going to go to Washington. I'm sure with him, you're going to have the number 2 overall pick. You're going to have cap space. You have a new owner. I think this is a very attractive job for Mike Vrabel, and I think the Commanders would also want Mike Vrabel in the building.
I think that your approach for the Commanders here, I get it, right? New ownership group, they want to hit on this next head coach. They need to hit on this next head coach. And Vrabel is a guaranteed product. And this is a job with a lot of appeal because they have a lot of cap space. You could argue that they have the most appeal out of any head coaching job. You really can. They have a lot of cap space. They have a lot of young pieces. You have the second overall pick. There's truth to that. However, I feel like if I'm Washington, this is where we just kind of swapped our picks. You have Ben Johnson going to Seattle, but Vrabel going to Washington. I have Vrabel going to Seattle, but then Ben Johnson going to Washington. I think that's what's going to happen. Like I just said, they're a young team, okay? They're rebuilding. That's why they traded away their two edge rushers, Chase Young and Montez Sweat. That's why. They're committing to a rebuild. I think that they want to bring in someone that could be that next Kyle Shanahan, okay? And Ben Johnson has been a part of a rebuild before. He was a big part of a super team in terms of how to rebuild. I talked about it earlier. The textbook example of how to rebuild a football team is the recent Detroit Lions. That's really what it's been. And Ben Johnson has been part of that staff. He wasn't always the OC, but he has been part of that rebuild. He was an assistant. And I think that's also appealing. Obviously, if you're a rebuilding team, you want someone that was a part of that. Although there isn't the guarantee that he'll be a great head coach, quite like there is with Vrabel. And I think that's part of the reason I get where you're coming from. But I would understand them swinging big here. I think they will swing big just because they have an opportunity to really kickstart a potential, I don't want to say dynasty because that's getting ahead of yourself, but truly the assets that they have, the second overall pick, all the cap space, they really have the ability to kickstart something special. And would you rather get a kickstarted with, I don't want to say mediocrity because I like Vrabel, but would you rather get a kickstarted with a coach that's good but not quite great, or someone that could be the next Shanahan in Ben Johnson?
Yeah.
And it also could be the next Adam Gase. It also could be the next, Brandon Staley. So it could blow up in their face, but I also think Washington, I really want to get greedy with them. I'm going to swing big. I think they're going to get Ben Johnson, although I absolutely understand your argument with Vrabel.
Let me ask you. You're not a Commanders fan. You're not a Seattle fan. If you're Ben Johnson and you have a contract on the table from the Seahawks and from the Commanders, and you pick, which one you picking?
I mean, that is tough because right now, Seattle is in the best spot right now. But Washington, you have the most to work with. You're going to have a quarterback on a rookie deal. You're going to have your pick of what is supposedly a loaded quarterback class. I think I'd go Washington because while Seattle's in the best spot to have success right now, Washington is in the best spot to have long-term success. And again, I think this is a ownership group that's gonna really just allow you to take your time. Okay, they're not in a rush at all. They just bought this team. They're in no rush to instantly become the Super Bowl champion. If you go to Seattle, there's pressure on you. If you have below 8 wins in your first year, all of a sudden you're on the hot seat the next season. Meanwhile, with Washington, you get 7 wins. You're safe.
Yippee! Yeah. That's a good season in Washington to get 7 wins. Yeah.
So that's how I look at it. I think the job security is really different in Washington, and that's part of the reason that you would want to take that job as opposed to Seattle.
Okay. All right. I understand the argument. I get it. We'll see. We'll see what the Seahawks do. I actually I don't feel super I wouldn't bet money on Ben Johnson. I wouldn't bet money on Mike Vrabel. If there's one thing I've learned being a Seahawks fan, it is to expect the unexpected. Truthfully, I have every year, you do mock drafts, you do everything like this. I have never gotten it right because the Seahawks are just the most unpredictable team that has ever existed. They just do whatever they want. They'll probably hire somebody that neither of us even mentioned. So that's just what it is. But do you want to go ahead and get to the Falcons? Because I presume
there's one team. There's one team. And there's the greatest coach of all time available.
Yeah.
So
the one that beat him in the Super Bowl.
Unless you want to throw out Raheem Morris here. Or, I mean, it sucks. Mike McDonald.
Yeah.
It sucks that Mike McDonald, he deserves a job. He does, but I don't think he'll land one. And that sucks because that means the Ravens, or I guess it doesn't suck because the Ravens are going to be a fun team to watch. But that means if the Ravens don't win a Super Bowl this year, they're going to have another shot because that defense is going to be great again next year if McDonald doesn't get hired. But let's stop dancing around the bush. We both have the Atlanta Falcons getting Bill Belichick, the guy responsible for 28-3, the greatest choke in NFL playoff history.
Yep.
Considering the magnitude of it. I know numerically it isn't technically the biggest, but it's the biggest. Come on.
It's the biggest. Yeah, it's the biggest. I think that this is just so ironic in so many ways. I think, obviously, you talk about the Super Bowl, but to me, what's funniest is just imagining Bill Belichick, like, at the city of Atlanta. I just think it's hilarious. Like, this modern, like, you know, urban city, and then it's just Bill Belichick in there. I think just geographically, it's just a hilarious pairing. But it works for the effect that the Falcons have not had, what can I say? They haven't had a good team in a while. Like, they haven't been a playoff caliber team for years now. And Bill Belichick, one thing he'll do is he'll get the most out of your team. He's the greatest coach ever. He would be following in the steps of Tom Brady in the sense that they left the Patriots for an NFC South team, which I think would be hilarious, in a bad division now. And listen, the Falcons have guys. I think you talk about Mike Vrabel bringing over Arthur Smith. I think Bill Belichick is going to bring Josh McDaniels. Yes. I think that'd be a little more. I think it'd be a little more
no doubt in my
but
mind.
Hey, but Josh McDaniels has been a good offensive coordinator in the league. He's not been a good head coach in both of his AFC West tenures, but he's been a good offensive coordinator. He's trusted by Bill. They work well together. He'll bring that Falcons team to be as good as humanly possible. Because the Falcons aren't interviewing Bill Belichick, right? Bill Belichick is interviewing the Falcons. He's got options, right? He is not confined to plead with the Falcons. If the Falcons, don't want to meet his demands, he'll say, cool, I'll go somewhere else. This is the greatest coach in the history of the NFL that we're talking about here, right? We're not talking about Frank Smith. No offense to Frank Smith. But Bill Belichick, I think, is going to be the Falcons. They have a lead, which they've had a lead, with Belichick before, unfortunately. That didn't turn out so good. But they have a lead. They've interviewed him multiple times. There seems to be some mutual interest. And, yeah, Bill Belichick seems like he's going to be the next head football coach, which, again, from a cultural standpoint, the New England Patriots could not be more different than the Atlanta Falcons. But in a strange way, it kind of works. It kind of works for Bill Belichick.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the division, and I think that point should be emphasized because I don't think Belichick's playing for another Super Bowl, although obviously he wants to win another Super Bowl. The reason he's still coaching is so he can get the all-time wins record. He wants Shula's record. He does.
Yeah.
And when you're in the NFC South, it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy to beat the Saints twice a year. It's pretty easy to, and I know the Bucs are in the playoffs, and we talked earlier. I think they could give them problems, obviously, but I think Baker Mayfield versus Bill Belichick, Belichick's winning at least one of those every year, right? And then you have the Carolina Panthers, who are in a bad spot at the moment. So for me, I just look at this as an easy opportunity for Belichick to go out and win those games that he needs to win in order to really cement his spot as the greatest coach of all time, cement his spot as the winningest coach of all time. I really think this gives him an opportunity to do that. Also, the young pieces, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson. The offensive line is really good at run blocking. They need to get better pass blocking, but they're a good run blocking offensive line. They have pieces. They definitely have pieces. They need to find the quarterback, and Josh McDaniels did a good job with the rookie quarterback in the past, that quarterback being Mac Jones. He gets the ability to pick a quarterback out of what seems to be a pretty stacked class. You feel very comfortable. And the defense has pieces right now, right? Jesse Bates is superb. And they have some other young guys on that roster, but
AJ Terrell is good. He's
AJ
good.
Terrell, is really good. Absolutely. And I get that it might not be like the most talented defensive unit, but who cares? I'm going to be honest. Who cares if the defense has any talent? You have Bill Belichick. The defense is going to look good. I'm sorry to break it to you. That's how that works. Okay.
Yeah.
They could have all undrafted rookies. They'd still finish as a top 10 defense if they have Bill Belichick because it's Bill Belichick. Yeah. It's what he does.
Look at the Patriots defense this year. Who do they have? Their two best players were hurt all year, and they were top 10.
They made Jabril Peppers look like one of the best safeties in the league. For what reason?
I mean, jeez.
For what reason?
Yeah, jeez.
Yeah. And this is a year after year thing. He's been doing it for 2 decades now, even longer if you count his DC days. I mean, he just has a knack for absurd defensive performances above expectation. And I think that'll happen in Atlanta too. And they have pieces anyway, so it's not like they need the greatest defensive mind in the history of the sport, but having it will definitely help. So that plus McDaniels, I think that should be great. I'm glad both of us agree on where Belichick is going to land. But I really quickly want to talk about a head coach hiring that we're not going to be trying to predict because it happened slightly before we started recording. Antonio Pierce is now the head coach of the Raiders. And
yeah,
it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise either of us. We were both talking about it. I mean, are you happy with this move for the Raiders? Yes, right? How could you say no? It would have been an uproar. It would have been an uproar if they didn't retain him as head coach.
And here's the other thing. You got to look at a couple years ago when, Rich Pisaccia took over after John Gruden got fired. They, went on a run at the end of the year, almost won that playoff game against the Bengals. The Raiders players were adamant that they wanted Rich Pisaccia back. Didn't happen. They went with an outside guy, and Josh McDaniels completely blew up in their face. Rewind the scenario where, hey, interim head coach rallied the troops. They finished the season strong. The players really like him. And this time, Mark Davis listened and hired Antonio Pierce. Obviously, hindsight is 2020. I'm sure we were both going to predict Antonio Pierce to be the Raiders coach had that not happened 20 minutes before we recorded this. He was the guy. They really couldn't have gone with anybody else. They couldn't have. I think they would have lost the locker room, truthfully, if they didn't go with Antonio Pierce.
They would have literally lost the locker room. Max Crosby said he was going to request a trade if they didn't keep him. So
they really had their hands tied, which you never want to be, I guess, held hostage when you're hiring a head coach. But in this scenario, the players made their opinions so vocal that I think that's a really good indictment on his character and on his leadership style as a head coach. I don't have necessarily a lot of great things to say about him in the sense that I haven't seen him coach for more than half a year. He didn't get to build the staff. He didn't get to have a whole offseason to prepare. This is going to be the year where we see how he is as a head coach. He's going to have his coaches for offensive coordinator, defense coordinator, the position coaches, everything like that. I'm sure a lot of those guys are getting replaced, but good for Antonio Pierce, former player. He connects really well with those guys. And I'm interested to see how he wants to rebuild this Raiders team in his image, not in the image of Josh McDaniels.
Yeah, and listen, he's not a big X's and O guy. He isn't. He is not a big X's and O's guy. But he fires up the locker room in a way not many other people can. And he had a winning record as a head coach this year, 1. And 2, I mean, that defense was playing out of its mind. When he came around, that defense was one of the top 10 in football last year after Antonio Pierce took over. And I don't think it's a coincidence you have this defensive-minded guy, this former linebacker come in, and all of a sudden that starts happening. Not to mention, too, you mentioned he didn't really have much of an offseason to work with these guys. Well, now he's going to be able to bring in a head coach that's better than Aiden O'Connell. He's going to be able to bring in guys that aren't just every former Patriot available.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what this Raiders team looks like next year. I think they're the type of team that's consistently going to fight for a playoff spot at worst. I could absolutely see them making some runs in that division that all of a sudden looks a lot more human with Mahomes and the Chiefs looking worse. I'm excited to see what the Raiders have in store next year. I really am. But that's all for this. I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you again, Mike, for coming on. I'm going to have
of course
that other YouTube video between the two of us talking about our divisional round predictions. I'm going to have that in the description. So feel free to check that out. Also, check out his channel after you watch that because he does make high caliber content on a consistent basis. And then, of course, feel free to check out my channel, subscribe, like it up if you enjoyed. Thank you again for listening, and thank you again for coming on, Mike.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me, man. I really love talking ball with you.
Okay.
Cool.